Daniel Naroditsky has a 90% win rate in this variation of the Jobava London. I've been playing this opening religiously for a while now. I can run you through the basics, show you why this specific variation is so common at the intermediate level, and then we'll run through a game of Danya absolutely destroying his opponent in this line. So the Jobava London starts d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, and then bishop f4. This is the setup you want. The problem with the Jobava London is you don't always get this position. There's actually a few options that black can do to deny it, and I'll quickly run you through what those are. So most people against d4, especially at the intermediate level and the beginner level, play the King's Indian. They're expecting the game to go like this, and then they're going to fianchetto their bishop and play like that. The fun thing about the Jobava London is you actually force the opponent into a perk, and they don't realize it. So our pawn not being on c4, it actually makes a big difference. It means the attack can get there so much quicker. And I'll show you the quick basics to this. So here's the setup to remember when you're playing this like a perk. You set up this this battery to get rid of that bishop. You long castle. They might start their own attack over here. You place your bishop here. You're not really in a rush to trade. You're more so just blocking their advancement of the h-pawn. And then when they start attacking, or regardless of what they do, we're going to start attacking over here. And there's a really fun line to remember where if you push here and they take with their knight, there's a really nice rook sacrifice. They take here, they take back, you bring your queen here, and it's mate in two. I have won so many games like this. Again, King's Indian players, they're not expecting it because this is the perk. The attack comes so much quicker, and it's a fun way to play. So that's a super quick summary of the perk defense from the white side. Another way they can decline the Jobava London is you play d4, d5, knight c3, and then they play the immediate e6. So you can force the Jobava here. It's totally fine. But what I actually like to do is transpose this into the Chigorin French. So this French is the most popular at the highest level, but it's incredibly rare at the beginner and intermediate level. And it's a little tricky to play, but if you learn it, black has no idea what they're doing, and you get some pretty nice basic idea wins. So the first thing they can do is trade, and I've had a lot of games go like this. Then they bring their knight out, you take, and they get this awkwardly placed queen here. And this queen can get trapped really quickly if they're not careful. I'll show you. So you develop your knight, they develop their bishop, you develop your bishop here. The best move is to attack the queen straight away, but I prefer to set this trap because so many players, honestly like 80% of players here, will just castle and then the queen is trapped. Literally every single square the queen has is defended by one of your pieces, and it's a super quick win. So that's the basics for that variation. Trust me, it happens so much, it's kind of silly. The other really common way to play, and just more generally how to play this setup, is you're constantly looking to jump this knight forward if you can, or you can always reroute it to here to defend this pawn. So I'll actually show you another quick trap, actually. This immediately just blunders a pawn. You just take, and then this pawn is under attack. So that's, again, a good thing to know. But the more common line I've found is they'll play knight f6, put your bishop here, they'll block, you go here, they'll then run their knight away, you trade your dark square bishop, and you basically have control of the dark squares with your pawns, and you've traded off the dark square bishop. So positionally it's really good. I like to play f4 here. They'll normally play c5. Again, this feels like a long line, but it's just so common. And then this is when you jump in with the knight. Basically, this square is just going to be an amazing outpost for your knight with the dark square bishops gone. And you're also aiming for this square, which plenty of people miss, with this rook being trapped. So I love this variation. It's a bit tricky to learn. And again, you can just play the Jobava London against it, but I'd really recommend it. It's a lot of fun. So now we actually get to talk about the Jobava London. It is a bit silly how often it'll transpose into the perk and the French, but it feels so good in those positions that I don't mind playing it. So for the Jobava London, let's run through the basics quickly before we show the Daniel Naroditsky line. So d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, and bishop here. So the whole idea of the Jobava London is you want to get your knight here and immediately go for this. So A common blunder, especially at the lower levels, is to bring your knight out here. And suddenly there's no defense for this. You have to play this line where black has to sacrifice a pawn if they find this, and then they'll normally bring their knight out. And you're chilling from here. There's a really fun queen sacrifice line to remember. So you defend your bishop. If they take, it's fine. And let's say they just develop normally. You can sack your queen here, because when they take back, you have this fork winning it back. So that's just a quick line to remember if they do blunder that, which is super common and one of the best things about this opening, especially in Bullet. And either way, it's not a gimmicky opener. It's still great to jump this knight forward. And I'll show you an example of that. So super common is e6 here. You jump your knight forward, and they're forced to generally block with the bishop. And straight off the bat, you immediately have the bishop pair. The other way is to do this awkward knight move. And the idea here is when they chase your knight away, we're going to try and trade this knight and ruin their pawn structure. If they decline and move their knight here, this knight actually just has a really tough time getting into the game. It's just, it has nowhere to go to, really. That square is blocked by our pieces as well. And we can get a really nice kingside attack, which is the general plan of the Joe Barber London as well. So the general setup to remember is you normally develop your knight here, your bishop here. You can also bring your queen out quite early, especially once this knight goes to here. Bring your queen out, and you get really early kingside attacks. You castle long most of the time, push your pawns forward, and it's a lot of fun. You get a lot of quick wins. I really highly recommend this opening. And I'll show you the specific variation now, which is super common and which Daniel Naroditsky just crushes with. So you'll see why this variation is so common. For black, all the moves are just very natural and stopping our threats. So the first threat in the Joe Barber London is jumping our knight forward. So black will generally play a6 or c6. c6 is a bit more common, although they both transpose into essentially the same line. Now, we're going to open up our bishop, and black wants to develop his bishop most actively, and more importantly, kind of stop our bishop from coming here. So he'll put his bishop there. Cool, this is all exactly as planned. We're going to develop our knight. They're just going to open up their bishop, and we have this position. You can see it's so natural, all of black's moves. You get this position so much, and the fun is about to start. So the most common move by far is to pressure this knight with the bishop, playing bishop d6, although the knight coming to d7 essentially does the same thing. So the move to remember here, and this is where all the fun begins, is g4. No one sees this coming. Everyone starts to blunder here, and even if they don't, you have a great position. So the tactical problem here that a lot of people run into is first they'll get rid of the knight. That knight is just annoying them. You go, fine, I'll take. And then they take with the bishop, obviously thinking that the bishop is defended by the knight and the queen can't attack it. The problem is, and this is why it's such a big blunder, you just play f3. Plenty of players don't see this coming, who plays f3 in the opener, and suddenly the bishop is hanging, the knight is hanging, and it's great. You win a piece out of the opening, and you're chilling. Your king's a little weak, but you can just have it chill on f2, and you'll win most of these games. So that's how people blunder so much in this position. What they should do is they should capture with the knight, and I've spent time learning the theory here, and trust me, no one has ever done this. This is the only way to kind of cleanly win the pawn, but you can see from the evaluation, it's still fine for white. Basically, you just chase the knight away. It gets like really awkwardly over here, and then you get the open G file. You have so much compensation, and you can see it's just such a fun position. So this is why we play for the Joe Barber London. So now we can hop into the Danya game. You know all the basics. You know the tactical trick here with G4, and we can see, even when the opponent doesn't make a massive blunder, how he wins so consistently in this position. He's up against a 2000 rated player, which is obviously far better than most of us, but well below Daniel's level, because something I noticed was in his GM games, they didn't look anything like my level games. So that's why I thought we'd just see him absolutely crush, and you'll see it's quite fun to watch. So black moves the bishop here, counterattacking the rook, and we just push f3. We're getting that bishop out of there again. We don't mind pushing f3 in the Joe Barber London. We're here to have fun. So black retreats the bishop, and then we play h4. So our threat is h5, and this bishop would have absolutely nowhere to go and get it trapped. This is the other trick, actually. Plenty of people will just trap their bishop by mistake this way. So what's forced is either h6 or h5. At the GM level, h5 is so much more popular, but at the intermediate level and beginner, h6 is way more popular. And the good thing about this is now we take that bishop and we get this super weak pawn, and obviously black's king side is in tatters. His queen side isn't that much safer either because he pushed c6 and his knight's not developed. So we're looking great as white here. So what Daniel does is he'll trade that bishop and then bring this bishop to attack this pawn. So literally you'll see the top engine move is king f7, which the opponent plays. And who wants to play this position as black? The engine is fine, but that king is completely weak. Our king is going to go queenside. We're chilling, and you can see why Daniel has such a massive win rate here. So Daniel develops his queen, again preparing queenside castle, and also just lining up his queen on the e-file, which might be helpful later. Black, and this is a big mistake for black, starts to open up the position. So you can already see that our king, once we've castled, which we're just one step away from, will be completely safe. But black's king, all in the open, it's not the same. So that's why it's a big mistake here from black to try and open up the center. And Danya just ignores and castles. So black then develops his knight. We get our king a little more safe. Always a good move when you do queenside castle. And then black starts to push the pawn. Now, I think black's idea here, and this is how a lot of my games go, which don't go too well. So it's actually a good lesson here, is he wants to trade and then basically just trade everything along this h-file, and then black's king being weak won't matter. So Danya does a really smart move here, and one I'll be making sure I remember, is he closes it down. So you'd think, well, why is he closing down these files since black's king is so weak? But because black pushed this pawn, we're going to have easy access to open the game in the center. So that's why Danya does that. And very quickly, you're going to see the engine still thinks this is fine. But again, black is already essentially dead loss. He starts to do a counterattack on the other side. Props to him. But Danya brings the bishop in and then starts to just blow open the center. You can see this queen on the e-file is already setting up some tactical ideas lined up with the opponent's king. And again, black is trying to create some counterplay, but there's just not enough. There's no time. Black, the center is about to explode. We have the pawn cube. Black's king is here. We also have this x-ray here. It's just so much pressure, and you're going to see how quickly things fall apart. So black decides to trade. Smartly, Danya comes back with the bishop. Obviously, taking with the pawn kind of would have blocked down this file where the queen is looking at the king. And taking with the queen, obviously, that knight is defending that square. So black is testing the limits here. He's staying with this x-ray because obviously if white takes here, the queen can just take back and it doesn't actually lose the knight like it might look like it being a fork. And you'll see just how quickly this game ends. I think it ends in just a few moves actually. So Danya brings more pieces to the party. We know how much he loves doing that. Just brings the rook in. They bring their rook in. I imagine just preparing to open this file, but it's all too slow. So now Danya gets the wheels rolling, opens up this discovered attack. The queen has to recapture here. And Danya moves his queen, setting up another x-ray, setting up the queen and the king alignment. It's just brutal for black in this position. And then the final finishing piece, black tries to run his king away, but then Danya moves the bishop here, sets up a checkmate threat here while also exposing the attack on the queen. And black simply resigns. He's going to have to give up his queen, and it's obviously going to be game over from there. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if there's any openings you'd like me to cover in particular. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and you can check out one of my other videos on the screen here.